To the election campaign now, and a crucial line of Labor attack against Campbell Newman appears to have been neutralised. Late this afternoon, the CMC found there was no evidence of misconduct involving Mr Newman in 3 matters while he was Lord Mayor. It's buoyed the LNP team a week out from polling day. Earlier, I spoke to the former Labor Treasurer, David Hamill, and the former Liberal Lord Mayor of Brisbane, Sallyanne Atkinson, for their analysis of the campaign and the implications of the flood report. Dr Hamill, you would have dealt with many people affected by the floods in your recent role as chairman of the Premier's Disaster Relief Appeal.
Sure.
Do you think this final report provides those people with some closure?
Look, it's been a terribly traumatic time for thousands and thousands of people. People were anticipating some answers. I think the Premier courageously went and established a commission of inquiry. I remember Sir Joe always said, don't establish any inquiry unless you know the answer. Well, Premier Bligh didn't know the answers, and hopefully these are the answers that the inquiry has produced will give closure for a lot of people.
Ms Atkinson, what's your reading of the people of Brisbane? There seems to be some lingering anger with people looking for someone to blame.
Oh, I think that's human nature. I think people always are looking for someone to blame. And one might argue perhaps that if the Premier didn't know the answer, she should have known the answer, because this was all about management. And I think one of the problems for the people that David's talking about, the ones that he had dealings with, that they are angry and they were looking for closure. And they've really been strung along. I think the fact that, you know, we had a commission of inquiry and cost, what, $15 million, and then they didn't get answers then, and then it had to be reopened and strung out. So I think they're feeling very unhappy.
Ms Atkinson, you alluded to concerns and criticisms that were made about the Commission. Now that this report is finished, should people have confidence in the findings and the recommendations?
Well, I think people should have confidence in the fact that both the Premier and Campbell Newman have said that the recommendations will be implemented, and that's a good thing, and I'm sure that Graham Quirk, as Lord Mayor of Brisbane, will be implementing those recommendations, and I'm sure there were some recommendations that will apply to the Council. Of course, you know, we haven't read the report, but I think the fact that there is a report and that it makes recommendations is a very positive sign.
And as you say, both Anna Bligh and Campbell Newman have both committed to implementing these recommendations. So with no difference to the major parties' response, is this going to have any bearing on the election?
Who knows which particular issues ultimately have bearing. I mean, the thing is, for people, there'll be some issues that impact for one group of people and not for another. So there'll be, you know, sure, there'll be people in some areas who will be looking for an answer, and they might be angry because they felt that the council in Brisbane hadn't responded quick enough. They might be angry because they feel the state government didn't respond quick enough. It'll be just one other factor in the general mix of issues.
Well, let's go to the election campaign. The Premier this week really tried to up the ante over Campbell Newman's family business dealings. Mr Hamill, is there a risk that this sort of constant attack will backfire? Has Labor gone too far?
Well, I can't answer that question in terms of, you know, has it gone too far or not. I mean, the substantive issue, though, is about accountability. And, you know, I remember a time when I was elected to Parliament, it's going a long time back now, there was a particular minister, Mr Hinds, who I used to say never had a conflict of interest. He always had a confluence of interests. He was able to never distinguish between what was public and what was private. Now, that's at the heart of the issue that's being canvassed publicly about the Newman family's financial dealings.
But do people like that negative attack?
Look, I don't like negative campaigning. I never have. Unfortunately, I think this campaign has seen a lot of negativity. I mean, the Katter Party ads, which at one level seem to attack Campbell Newman, I actually think they're more insidious than that.
Mr Newman has described the campaign as the dirtiest in Australia's history. Do you think that's true, Ms Atkinson, or does he need to accept...
You've seen a few.
I've seen a few.
Does he need to accept that state politics is more robust, that there's more scrutiny than local councils?
No, and it's not... The thing that really gets me is it has not been honest scrutiny, and I've found that people have turned off. My grandchildren said last night, why is everybody so mean to each other? And it's it's that whole negativity.
They should be more like us, shouldn't they?
They should be more like us, David. They should all be like us.
We've got over it.
But I really do want to say that I think it's... You talked about the Newman family. It's not the Newman family. It's in-laws. I mean, do you know what all your in-laws are doing? But Campbell has answered...
It's a very good question.
Campbell has answered all of those. There has been nothing substantive brought against them. There has been nothing substantial. Campbell declared all his interests when he was in City Hall, and that's on the record. And if they're going to talk about wrongdoing in City Hall, the Labor opposition was sitting there when he was Lord Mayor for 7 years. Why didn't they say anything?
Is some of the mud sticking, though? Because if you look at the polls, the news poll in The Australian today, Kate Jones is only 4 points behind Campbell Newman in Ashgrove. That's a bit too close for comfort for him, isn't it?
Well, it would be very unfortunate if it was because of mud sticking, because, as I said, I think the mud... I just think it's sort of sleazy and vicious, and I'm surprised. I mean, I'm surprised that the Premier has gone down this tack, because it's not quite fitting with her general image of, you know, babies and little children. And what we've seen, I think, is a campaign designed to camouflage an incompetent government. Well, it's all about the campaign, and that's distressing. I mean, democracy is a great idea, David. We agree with that, but if you make a judgment based on what happens in the campaign rather than what the government does or doesn't do, I think that's a tragedy.
I think two points. One about Kate Jones. I think none of us should overlook the fact that Kate is a terrific local member, and that's been the heart of Kate's campaign in Ashgrove. The other issue, as I said, is about accountability. I mean, I remember what life was like in the Queensland Parliament pre the Fitzgerald inquiry. It was when sort of ministers could run and do real estate deals out of their electorate offices. I mean, it was pretty awful stuff.
There does happen to be 3 ministers in jail at the moment.
And I just think that, you know, you've got to keep the business of government beyond reproach. It's really hard. I think it's really hard, really tough, being in public office today. It was hard enough when we were there. It's got even harder in terms of the accountability.
OK, well, while ever the contest is close in Ashgrove, though, people are going to be asking who will be Premier if the LNP wins government but Campbell Newman doesn't win Ashgrove. Ms Atkinson, how should Campbell Newman be answering that question? Because voters don't seem to be satisfied with the answer he's giving.
He should be answering it fairly truthfully. I mean, all the research shows...
Is he doing that?
I haven't actually... I'm not sort of a big television fanatic, I'm afraid. Perhaps I'm like your average Queenslander. I'm turning off a bit. But the truth of the matter is that all our research shows, all the LNP research shows, that if Campbell Newman doesn't win Ashgrove, we won't win government. And I think people throughout the state, and certainly people in Ashgrove, want a change to the government. And of course, people in Ashgrove do know, as some of them have said to me, that if Kate Jones should get back, she'll go off to be a minister straight away. So she's not going to be sort of on the ground in Ashgrove.
She has said she isn't going to do that, though.
Well, you know, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm sure she's not...
Well, I've done a bit of political analysis too over the years. I mean, it's interesting. It takes about, I think it's about a 4% and a bit swing for government to change in Queensland. Ashgrove is sitting on a little over 7%. So I think Mr Newman's figures are a bit out. I mean, the LNP can win this election without Campbell Newman. I think he's answering quite honestly, though, when asked if he doesn't win Ashgrove, who will lead the LNP? He doesn't know, because the decision will be made by the LNP members in Parliament. And it could be one of half a dozen people.
David Hamill and Sallyanne Atkinson, I'm very sorry, but thank you so much for your time.